Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Baron Morton's feeling good. The offensive line is feeling fluid. Yo!
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet only $5, and you're getting a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And today, checking in on a couple of different fronts. We'll spend a lot of time on the offensive side of the football, hearing from Texas Tech offensive coordinator Zach Kittley. Want to get into an offensive line conversation that remains very fluid. And by the way, it's August 20th. If anybody needs a reminder, you're kicking things off on August 31st. We'll also talk Baron Morton's progression through fall camp. Seems to be progressing at a full tilt kind of pace, which is good news. And then I want to get into a broader topic as it relates to sort of a new approach to contact for Texas Tech defensively. We'll talk tackling, and we'll talk about a guy by the name of Richie Gray, who is now involved in the Red Raider tackling effort. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment. But first, let's begin with number one in the program. That's the QB, Baron Morton, and his offensive coordinator, Zach Kittley, talking about his progress through fall camp so far.
I'm really impressed with him. He's done a really good job. It's kind of funny. Yesterday was his first interception he's thrown all camp in a team setting, and that's in about somewhere between 150, 160 throws. So if you put that, let's say you're throwing 40 times a game, which is a pretty high number, but you do that times, your 12 games, you're talking 3 picks in 12 games. I'll take that. And that was even off a tip ball. So he's just doing a really good job of the things we're told him to focus on, protecting himself in the pocket, number one, not turning the football over, and then just making good decisions, and he's done a really good job with that. So that, number one, on the field, and then off the field, just leadership has been unbelievable. I think that's probably the biggest growth he's had, is just being one of the team captains and leading this football team.
It sounds like, Chris, that there has not really been any reining in of Baron Morton as they've progressed through fall camp. I'm sure you can lend some more insight to that. And obviously, any way you slice that, man, for a guy that was shut down back in the spring, that's good news.
Yeah, and what you hear Zach talking about is we hear gunslinger whenever Baron is described as a player. He's a gun. I mean, Joey says this all the time. It's almost just like everyday vernacular when it comes to describing Baron Morton as a player. It has been for the last two plus years. That's what he is, all those things. And I don't disagree. But what they are trying to get out of him, or trying to get him to tilt a bit, is more of the people hate this word, but this is the truth. You're trying to get a little more management involved there, and a little less gunslinger. Throw it in the stands. Check it down. Don't take the chance down the field. Take care of the football. Manage the situation is ultimately what you're. We don't want to take the gunslinger away from you, but we need to mix in. When we need to take a chance and when we don't need to. One, we need to cut down on the turnovers. Okay. 2, we need to take care of you. That's kind of 1 and 1A is a reason why you would want to him to be more manager, just a little bit. I mean, we're not asking him to be a bus driver. Nobody's asking for that. Right. I love the bus drivers out there in the world. And there are those that, Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. The Raven fans out there would be frustrated, or certainly Trent Dilfer would be frustrated hearing me say that, but that's the truth. He won a Super Bowl with the Ravens being a bus driver, which is crazy, but that's the reality of it, in my opinion. And I think with Baron, you're trying to get him. You want all the, him to try to take a chance at times and throw guys open, and to, underhand it, no look, all the stuff that Mahomes does and everything like that. You just want him to be healthy, and then 2, let's really eliminate turnovers. But it sounds like the health part of this is the good thing. He's not had any flare-ups or anything like that, knock on wood, and you hope that continues. But so far, so good. But this is the maturation of number 2 is what you're starting to see. Little less gunslinger, a little more manager. So maybe he just has to button his buttons all the way up to the top, like I did, instead of just letting it fly open like he has been before. I don't know.
Little longer in the tooth, and maybe that comes with some wisdom in and of itself. But I think there's also something to be said for being a part of a team, and we don't know if it'll play out this way, but we have high hopes. Being a part of a team that is in games to where you don't feel like maybe you've got to get something all back with every throw or with every possession that could lead to some of those chances being taken. And by the way, if you're doing everything that Patrick Mahomes does now, you got to include behind the back as well. Just want to make sure that Barron knows that. No pressure, no big deal. But I'm really the health part of it is what I'm more invested in as far as the storyline at this point in the year. Clearly, I hope we're able to kind of move past that once we get some weeks in the rear view where he's playing games and continuing to feel good. But I don't know what I expected going into fall camp, Chris, but maybe I was naive. Maybe I wasn't. I was assuming there would be a little bit more, I guess, policing of the reps or kind of trying to protect himself from himself as far as wanting to be out there all the time. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like that has been the case. And if that is the reality, I guess they really found something in where Jacksonville or wherever they went to visit with the specialists and kind of reformat, I guess, the way that he was going about some things. But I hear of no reining in on like a health front, like, hey, trying to limit reps or anything like that.
Yeah, and do I know how many throws he's making each day, give or take? No, I don't. But I think that the thing, it's Tom Gormley who you're talking about in Jacksonville, and remember that was a let's take a thrower and let's max him out, and then let's also mitigate risk is ultimately what they were trying to develop. In that, here's how we warm up. Here's how we kind of ramp things up. Here's how we maintain. Here's how we try to avoid overdoing it. All the things. Because what Tom did not believe in, which is what kind of threw us for a loop back when we kind of stumbled upon this whole deal, was he did not believe in going cold turkey. Hey, shut it down. Don't throw. No, that actually went opposite of what Tom wanted. It's all about easing into it and continuing to develop that muscle memory but it's all about it's like in college they have what they call pre-practice, practice, post-practice, which is just another way of saying, man, this takes up a lot of your time. You need to show up and hydrate, then you got to stretch, then we're going to do the walkthrough, then we'll actually practice. Then after practice, there'll be some post-practice where some of you will have to stay and do some extra drills, and then maybe we need to stretch again. Then there's the nutrition aspect, and before you know it, it's like, damn, this is like a 5 or 6 hour work shift here is what this equaled. But I'm trying to kind of explain that's really what I think Tom was trying to get with Barron, is trying to introduce the way he needs to think about it from the pre, during, and post with the way, whether it's a game routine, a practice routine, an off day, whatever. And I think, again, trying to mitigate risk while trying to maximize what he is as a thrower is the way Tom refers to him as.
Man, I'm glad you bring up sort of the schedule there, because I was just taking in a couple of days ago the most recent edition of the Texas Tech fall camp kind of documentary follow along, Welcome to Lubbock, the brand, etc., on Texas Tech Plus and on YouTube, I think. And one of the things they were just highlighting, which was totally lost on me as a fan, was kind of that nutrition schedule. And it's not just about like, hey, eat foods that are good for you, not too many Skittles or M&Ms or things like that, but the post-practice thing where they were really highlighting the thought of trying to get them to, I guess, gain back some of the weight that they could have possibly lost during the practice or during the week. I mean, it's like a daily thing where they're really dialing this stuff in. And it was just another reminder to me that whoever thought that this was amateur sports has totally missed the boat. It is professional amateur sports. Amateur sports is played out there at Amherst High School or wherever you might be on any Friday night, I suppose. But man, the things that they focus on and that they really dial in. I mean, can you imagine telling some guys that came through a college program, decades ago, maybe even just when you were on campus, or hell, even when I was on campus just 20 years ago or so, that it was going to be like this? I mean, there is no detail that is not or that is lost on them, is there?
Yeah, back in the day, it was like, hey man, after practice, eat a granola bar. It'll
drink some water.
Drink some water. Here's some Gatorade and all that. And you're like, man, this is like superhuman fuel here. I'm special, But these days, in some ways, college athletes, especially at the Power 4 level, are like chemistry experiments, because they've never been introduced to the level of calorie intake or the thought process. And it is a job. I mean, because it's like, a lot of these kids, like, I'm too tired to eat. No, here's what you're going to put in. But this is how when you see people 6 months at a time or whatever, and they look completely different. Again, chemistry experiment. High school players out there have no grasp for that aspect of the training and the nutrition that totally is worlds different than what you're going to get at most high schools.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of money, but I mean, that is one of the things that coaches, when they take over jobs, they really put, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, when staffs started to expand, it's the nutrition aspect, because they don't want to be dealing with a basketball team or a football team that is losing weight as the season goes along, because you don't have the money invested or the nutritionist that is there monitoring and all these things. And then you get into league play and you're like, man, my team ain't what it once was, which is, I mean, it was the real thing. And I've known coaches that have been hired here, and they fight for some of these things, and they push back or demand, like, we need more resources here, or I need somebody on the job here full time with this particular sport to monitor. And Tech has unbelievable nutrition staff spread athletic department wide to maintain the 4 to 5 meals a day, the in-betweens, the supplements, the whatever is allowed. And it's certainly a little cottage industry for a lot of folks out there, because it's so important.
And for different position groups. I mean, and I feel bad. I forgot. I'm sorry to the two ladies who they highlighted on the show that were the chief nutritionists, if you will.
Well, Hannah's the main one. Hannah's the main one. Yes.
Shout out to Hannah, because they were even talking about, like, hey, the meal for a running back or a wide receiver has got to be different than the meal for an offensive tackle. I mean, because they're not all gaining or losing the same. It's crazy, and it's wild to see how far we've come. And it seems like Texas Tech is in a good spot in that regard. So we're glad for that.
Yeah, like the post-practice shake, some are like to cut weight, so that's going to be minimal calories and things like that. Others are loaded with calories to try to gain or replenish, and then there's some maintain. So again, chemistry experiment. That's why it's all I mean, very rarely are things slipping through the cracks at this level, because everybody's looking for just that little bit of advantage, or in this case, everybody's doing this. And so not only we're not trying to find an advantage, we're trying to keep up with everybody, because this is what everybody's doing.
Football is a game of inches, and sometimes those inches refer to the waistband. So you never know exactly where that edge could show up. Speaking of the big boys, let's get to the offensive line and what remains a fluid situation at this point in fall camp. First, today's episode brought to you by Ibotta, a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're buying. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you can get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Best Buy, and plenty more. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Speaking of the big boys, let's get to the offensive line and what remains a fluid situation at this point in fall camp, not too far away from the opener. And I don't know, we'll get into it, but maybe even as fluid now as it has been at any point this offseason. First, let's take a listen again to offensive coordinator Zach Kittley talking about the group up front.
It's been interesting. I mean, we've had guys everywhere. We've had multiple different lineups this year. Again, it's a good problem to have because we feel like we've got some guys that can play a lot of positions, but I mean, you've had Sterling out there at tackle. You've had Caleb play some tackle. You've had Ty Buchanan play some tackle. Dalton Merriman playing some tackle. So those four guys have kind of been the rotation, and we've been flipping and flopping them. You know, again, we're just still to this day, even practice 12 in, we're still rotating those guys, trying to find our best five that can go win us football games.
Now, it was interesting also and encouraging to hear Coach Kittley describing last week Sterling as being back at 100%. So that's good news. But I mean, Chris, this was a spot where I wouldn't say necessarily worried, but anxious to see how it may come together. And I got to tell you, I was hoping it would come together a little bit earlier in camp. Some things out of your control as it relates to injury and things like that. But how do you assess the offensive line situation as we sit here August 20th?
Makes you feel a bit uneasy. I mean, if there's a positive here in that there's some depth and there's some versatility. But boy, how much better would you feel if you're like, yeah, we got the five. We know exactly where they go. Like, when's the first game? Like, you know, now we're just trying to figure out who's 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever. But you're not there yet. So, and I tell you what else I hear him saying is I think we need to be prepared for the fact that, I say fact, it may not be, but it could be. But I'd kind of almost given up on this or ruled it out at some point, and I'm no longer willing to do that. I think you could be looking at a scenario to where Caleb Rogers is absolutely playing one of your tackle spots, and I guess I'd be willing to say left tackle. I don't think Ty Buchanan would play the entire spring and the majority of fall camp and then move to left. Maybe they would, and then you could put Caleb at right. I don't know what, but I think that we need to change the mindset a little bit and think that that Caleb is strictly an interior player now. They've experimented with this for a year almost, and nothing has been sorted out. And I don't think you have your tackle situation resolved. So I guess what I'm saying is we'll see if I'm right. But here's what I think you have to dumb it down. I think you have a starting, assuming there's no injuries and everybody's back and healthy, which we can't. It's hard to assume because we still got enough before the season.
Sure. All
things being equal, you're going to have an offensive line that looks like one of these two. This is what I think. Senator Sheridan Wilson is going to be a part of both of these groups. Vinny Scurry at left guard is going to be a part of both of these groups. I'm going to go ahead and say that Ty Buchanan at right tackle is going to be a part of both of these groups. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they would move him to left or whatever, but I'm going to say that. So now we get into, okay, Sterling Porsche and Caleb Rogers, left tackle and right guard. Or we go Caleb Rogers at left tackle and then Davion Carter at right guard. So I think that you either have, whereas at this point, I guess it's Sterling Porsche or Davion Carter are either in or out of the lineup. And Caleb Rogers is the one constant, but he's just playing different positions depending on which five you ultimately go with. But that's just me trying to project or guess, but that's what I think you're looking at. Again, if everybody is healthy, but I just am not going to rule out anymore that Caleb Rogers wouldn't be, because I mean, he's saying it to you. we're moving everybody around and all those things, and there's just not a lot of Sharpie or cement, or you're not hearing those terms like we've heard at different times of the spring or in fall.
Yeah, and I think it's just by process of elimination. It doesn't really take even a lot of guesswork necessarily if he's, including a tackle group on both sides to include Buchanan, Rogers, Merriman, and Porsche. Well, if Buchanan is cemented, as some indications would have us believe, then we're talking about Porsche, and we're talking about Merriman. One guy doing it for the first time in his college career, if it were to be him, that being Merriman, and Porsche doing it for the first time on this level, that being a power conference level, and obviously at Texas Tech. And so who is kind of the guy that's not like the others in that regard? Well, that's Caleb Rogers, who's obviously been a starter for you and has done it at Texas Tech and done it in this conference. But also, Chris, I mean, we heard so much talk about the future for Caleb Rogers from a professional standpoint. Seems to be more on the inside. It was talk about center, and then it was talk about guard. So I would have trouble painting this, I guess, if it wound up being Rogers at a tackle spot again, in a positive light. I don't know. It almost would seem like you don't have any other option, because just taking them at what they said, including him at the bowl game last year, the intention or the hope was that he would be somewhere on the inside. So I don't know. That's something to obviously keep an eye on, but I don't know that it is a positive development before we've seen anything happen. Of course, we're talking about fall camp and things on paper, but I don't know if I could consider it a positive development if that wound up being the result. Do you think I'm wrong or making too much out of it, or how do you assess that?
I just don't think that this is I mean, again, there is a positive to this depending on your view of things, in that they've got options, they've got versatility, they've got depth. But I offer that up, and then just to say again, but how much better would you feel if, like, hey, here we go. We're trying to, at this point in time, we're trying to figure out who the backup center, the backup interior swing guard, and the swing tackle is. That's what we're ultimately trying to figure out. We've got the rest figured out, but you're not there yet. And he's telling you this. I don't know at what point, Zach and Clay and Joey and everybody kind of collaborate and go, okay, this is what we're going to roll with. And the tricky thing is, as we have maintained throughout the summer, this could spill way into September, even October, before you kind of get this solidified. Again, injury could dictate it. We gave somebody a shot or thought this group would work, and it just didn't. So let's try this. So I don't see how there's just too much ultimately positive you can take from the whole conversation, other than you have options, you have versatility, there is some depth, and all those things, but it's just not an easy feeling when that's such an important position group, and one that we talked about, we've now for about 9 months, that you tried to address, and you're just not quite. It doesn't mean that it won't get fixed or it won't be better or get figured out tomorrow or 6 weeks from now, but right now it just doesn't feel like that they're quite there yet.
Yeah, it would definitely feel like, okay, plan A did not work out, so we're on to a B or a C if that's the way that it shows up on opening day. So we'll see. Still a little bit of time between then and now. Let's wrap up the conversation today, Chris, introducing the audience. Maybe you know about him, maybe you don't. If you don't, here's an opportunity to learn about a man named Richie Gray. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and America's #1 sportsbook is shaking it up to kick off football season with an offer a football fan can't afford to miss. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And, of course, you can cancel at any time. Again, from right now through September 22nd, bet $5 and take advantage of a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Here's an opportunity to learn about a man named Richie Gray. This guy kind of been a part of the program, I suppose. I think I heard Coach Bookbinder, and we'll hear from him, linebackers coach, coming up in just a moment. His approach has been a part of the program going back to the spring of 23 is what I think I heard Coach Bookbinder say, and he'll remind us here in just a moment. But Richie Gray, if you did not know, is the founder of GSI Performance. He is an elite performance skills and contact coach who has changed the way coaches coach, players train, and prepare for the area of contact and collision globally. This has nothing to do with global politics or anything like that. This is about rugby. This is about football and maybe something else in between. And some of the differentiating factors, again, according to GSI Performance, elite performance coaching, technical training equipment, and contact and collision coaching methodology. So this was something I was really interested to hear Coach Bookbinder talk about, I think, last week, as it relates to the way that defensively they're now approaching, again, contact and or tackling. Let's take another listen to Josh Bookbinder.
I met Richie probably 2 years ago at our coaches convention, and it was through a mutual friend. I met at the convention, and we kind of kept in touch. And then when you hear the guy talk about what he does, right? So he's Richie's like a world-renowned rugby coach who kind of stepped aside from coaching to specialize in contact and tackling, essentially. So he consults for several teams, consults for several NFL teams. And then works with the rugby team in France throughout the year. But we kind of started talking, going back and forth, and he has some equipment that he designed, and he kind of wanted a college program to try it out. And so he was gracious enough to kind of come on board and help us out with kind of what he expects from the equipment and give us some ideas, and just really wanted us to put it through the ringer. And so, he's been kind of back and forth on the phone and Zoom, and he's been out here a couple times over the last year and a half or so. But I think he's made an impact, on how we tackle and some of our thoughts on contact. He's been here a couple times in person. Anytime he's here in person, I want him talking to our guys, because if you listen to the guy talk, there's not many times in life where you can hear an expert, right? This guy's an expert. So A, he's an expert. B, those guys walk out of the room wanting to absolutely go take it to somebody. So he's an expert, and so we've been on Zoom several times as well. In the off season, we kind of had some cut-ups that we wanted him to look at and kind of give us his opinion on how we're teaching tackling and stuff. So anytime I've had him on, campus or a couple times on Zoom with the guys, it's an opportunity to learn. He's probably added some layer of detail, and especially with his equipment that he designed. It's pretty cool. So he's an innovator, right? He's an inventor. He's invented all sorts of equipment for rugby teams to use. Now he's invented some tackling equipment for football. So the tackling drills still, I would say, are in the same general universe, but he's kind of helped us add some detail to it. The real benefit, I think, is in the off season. So the equipment can be used by our guys in the off season, and there's a whole program that they've been through the past 2 off seasons to kind of keep them battle ready. And I think that's been such an incredible benefit to it.
Sort of out of left field, Chris, to hear about this, but another one of those things like we're talking about with nutrition, where a program's trying to find an advantage. So I was really curious to learn more about Richie Gray.
I think over the last, period of time, I think coaches have tried to find different ways to tackle safer. I think is ultimately kind of what started some of this trend. I'll tell you, because Pete Carroll with the Seahawks, they would do these TV pieces on the Seahawks, really learning the rugby style of tackling. And there were some periods of time there where the Seahawks defense was one of, if not the best in the NFL for a stretch, the Legion of Boom and all those things up there. But that's when I first kind of was introduced to, and again, it was here's how we can be really physical but safe and keep our guys healthier and avoid concussion, neck, whatever issues that we would have.
And avoid 15-yard penalties and or ejections.
Bingo. Exactly.
Legally as well.
Just safer and smarter. Yeah, for all the above. I was unaware that Tech was using Coach Gray. This was new to me. It sounds like that this has been something that's been going on for a year and a half, 2 years. But what I appreciate about Coach Bookbinder is that there's too many coaches out there in the industry, high school, college, be pro, whatever, that think they've got it all figured out and aren't wanting to hear, have any input or help from outside entity because they think they've got all the answers. No, this is how we've done it. This is how we've always done it. What do you mean? And this is Coach Bookbinder putting his ego aside and going, no, I like this is innovative and it's working and it's smarter and all these things. And, I'm sure there's some resources that you need to be able to use an outside entity, whether it's equipment or just him coming in and talking to your guys and all those things. But again, it's about finding that edge, man. It really is. But there's a whole line of equipment. And I think that even Coach Bookbinder talked about, he's like, we just love having Coach Gray around whenever he can be, or on Zoom or whatever, because the accent is undefeated. And I would attempt to do a Scottish accent for you right now, but I'm just not. I'm not going to go that
route. I really feel like it seems, and maybe this is because of, less padding. They don't have a helmet in rugby and things like that. But it seems like that's become a really popular thing in some recent years. Again, going back to sort of the change in the way the game was called, which is, I think, where it really began. Like, hey, we don't want to be penalized for doing this stuff incorrectly. But it seems like there's been a lot taken from rugby, or at least an attempt to take a lot from rugby and apply it to American football.
Yeah, and Australian rules football, same. There's some different rules and concepts and all that. It all looks similar to me. I've actually been to an Australian rules football game in Sydney, Australia, when I was about 14 or 15 yards. Yeah, like goal. They're. I'm like, okay, when do they kick it? When do they run it? Why is there this big group of people? And then somebody just comes running out with it, and it's very confusing to me. But the tackling part, there are no pads here. There are no. This is just like a lot of open field, and your task in a lot of the Australian rules football and the rugby aspect is you've got to get somebody to the ground, and you may have. It's a much bigger, wider space, and so you don't have the sideline to help. You don't have maybe as many teammates out there that are, swarming to the football and all those things. So you've got to be really good at the open field tackling concept, and that's why I think that football coaches at different levels have kind of looked at that and gone, "This translates. Like we need to, we need to be better here." And how do they teach it? And all those things, because they're those guys and some of that deal, they've just got really high socks.
That's it.
There's no shoulder pad.
Well, I think
band, there's no helmet. There's no,
I think with the helmet and the pads, like you can maybe over the years, a football player would somewhat fall into the habit of relying on impact to make the tackle. And you always hear wrapping up, wrap up, get your head across the bow, wrap up. And so maybe that's something that's a little bit more rooted in what they have to do from a rugby standpoint. And of course, talking way out of the wheelhouse if I'm breaking down rugby tackling protocol. But nonetheless, it's just getting a man to the ground. So probably a whole lot to take from it. And hopefully it'll be something that proves to be an advantage for Texas Tech. But something to note, certainly, as they go through fall camp and progress into the season, I would keep that name on the radar. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Appreciate the insights and perspectives. Enjoyed it. And we'll do it again on the other side. Guns up, people. Boom, boom. And thank you to, I'm told about a former Lady Raider up in the Plainview, Amarillo area, I should say, that monitors our daily recordings here. So double guns up. Yes, absolutely. Appreciate all the Tech fam out there for listening and paying attention to what we do here. Season's almost here, people. So no doubt. Yep. Enjoy your lovely Tuesday. That's right. And get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Appreciate being your first listen. And for your second listen, check out Locked On College Sports right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, also on YouTube or anywhere you'll get them casts. For Chris, I'm Casey. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.